19 days after my husband declared bankruptcy, I saw him at the luxury store where I work. He was dressed in high-end designer clothes, looking polished and confident, completely different from the way he appeared when he hurried out of the house that morning. He explained with ease that after being married to a wealthy man for 2 years, it was only fair to put me to the test. If I couldn't handle it, we should get a divorce, and he would ensure I received nothing. I wanted to escape, but his female companion stopped me. When I returned home, I resolved to sell all the designer goods I owned to settle my debts. After treating myself to some good food, I ordered bland takeout soup since he enjoys putting on a show. If he wanted to act, I would join him. Why should I forfeit my share of his assets? It was my 5th day at work, and I didn't expect to see fuss here. He wore a tailored suit that highlighted his tall frame, making him look distinguished. I remembered this suit was custom made for him, though technically it should have been sold to pay off our debts. Seeing him wear it made me wonder how his family was managing after the bankruptcy. Fos stood out in the crowd, his expression smug and self-satisfied. The woman next to him added, "It hasn't been long, has it? She only got with you for the money. She'll leave soon enough." Fos looked irritated and replied sharply that if Darlene Schwartz couldn't pass the test, they should divorce, and she wouldn't get a dime. I felt a cold chill spread through me as tears filled my eyes. I thought we were partners, but it turned out this was just a one-sided test. I recalled Hazel Burke, Fos's childhood friend who suffers from occasional aphasia. When she gets emotional, words fail her, but Fos and his friends always cater to her needs. Hazel only had to glance at something to get what she wanted. She was gleefully selecting items when, just as I was about to leave, she called me back. She asked if I'd seen any new customers come in. I wore a mask that day because I was sick. The store manager had suggested I take the day off, but I stayed to help pay off my husband's debts. Luckily, no one recognized me, though it left me feeling uneasy. I diligently picked out clothes and shoes for Hazel. She spotted a special pair of red-bottom heels and casually stretched out her foot, expecting me to help her try them on. Fuss seemed surprised when he saw the shoes. I took them and knelt to help her, knowing full well they wouldn't fit her. These shoes were mine, custom made by Fuss for our 2nd anniversary, a one-of-a-kind pair. I had been heartbroken when I sold them to protect his secret. The irony was painful. Hazel, frustrated, kicked me away and tried putting on the shoes herself. I sank to the floor and accidentally made eye contact with Fos. I quickly looked away and muttered an apology. Fos, noticing Hazel's frustration, gently pulled her into his arms and said, "Don't be upset. These shoes don't look good. Let's pick another pair." He asked me to bring different shoes. I blinked hard to keep the tears from falling. They eventually left, but Fos soon returned. He pointed to the shoes Hazel had tried on and asked me to wrap them up. In that instant, he pulled down my mask. Later, Yin complained about rude customers, and I smiled, thankful that Inia had covered for me. I knew Fos too well. He was always suspicious and rarely trusted anyone fully. I used to think I was ordinary, but his doubts made it clear he suspected me of being a gold digger. After finishing my shift early, I got a bank card in my name. I had been using Fos's secondary card all along. I sold all the designer goods to pay off my debt and deposited the money into this card. I chose a specific restaurant and ordered a feast. Since he claimed bankruptcy, I had been saving every cent to help him. After enjoying the meal, I returned to my tiny rented room and staged a scene to make it look like I had been cooking. I served the takeout on special plates. When he walked in, I slumped onto the small sofa, feigning exhaustion. Fos's expression softened, and he pulled me into his arms. "You're back," I said. "I made dinner for you." He smiled and praised me. "Our Darlene is incredible!" But his smile faded when he saw the food. Fuss, who grew up in luxury, wasn't used to such simple meals. The temptation to refuse was clear, but I looked at him pitifully. "You must be tired. I made this for you, so please try it." He reluctantly smiled and started eating. "Eating out isn't healthy," I added. "I'll cook at home from now on. It's cheaper and more convenient." He wanted to object, but I spoke first. If I can't work outside, I should at least help at home. I had told him before that I wanted a job to ease his burden, but he refused. Now I had no choice but to secretly look for work. I went to the luxury store because I knew you wouldn't come there and accidentally run into me. He didn't respond, but something seemed to click in his mind. Why did you just call me hubby? We usually refer to him as Foos. It feels more casual that way. Fuss often carries an intimidating presence and looked slightly annoyed, but I remained calm. I wasn't the one at fault here. Calling him hubby felt more personal, something only I could say. He gently patted my head, a gesture filled with affection. Fuss, you can only treat me this way, right? I turned away and gave a faint, bitter smile. The following day, Hazel returned. She requested the red-bottom high heels she had tried on previously. I immediately explained what had happened. Furious, Hazel slapped me, knocking my mask off, and my face flushed red with embarrassment. She paused for a second before a smirk slowly appeared on her lips. I knew she intended to complain to Foos about me. At noon, I went to his pretend company to drop off his lunch. It was located on the first floor of an office building, which I found quickly. When I called his name, he looked more frightened than surprised. He had been sternly reprimanding someone, but quickly shifted to smiling and apologizing to that same person. The person noticed me and said something curtly to their boss. If I hadn't known the truth, it would have hurt deeply. In the stairwell, Foos tried to comfort me when he noticed my eyes were slightly red. I smiled to reassure him, but his gaze darkened when he noticed the mark on my cheek. Who hit you? He asked, his fingers lightly brushing my face. I turned away quickly, but he grabbed my wrist. His expression was fierce, like he was ready for revenge on whoever hurt me. My heart faltered for a moment. Then he saw Hazel's message, and his caring expression turned cold. He gripped my wrist tightly, causing pain. Are you working at a luxury store? Why do a job that requires you to put up with rude people? I was momentarily stunned and looked away awkwardly. His phone buzzed again. He glanced at the message, his grip on my arm shifting uneasily. Do you understand? He asked. Confused and unsure of what to say, I carefully replied, I know you don't want me working, but I want to help you. Fuss looked at me like I was completely lost. Then he turned around and made a call. Shortly after, I learned that she had started working that day. To be certain, he checked the security footage from the previous day and confirmed she hadn't been there. Hearing this, he exhaled, clearly relieved. Under my sincere gaze, he seemed uneasy and looked away. That job isn't suitable for you. Quit as soon as you can. Fuss thought quitting would hurt his pride, but wasn't that his intention? I changed the subject and asked, Did Hazel tell you she slapped me? He immediately checked his phone and questioned Hazel. Did you really hit her? Foos pulled me close, reassuring me, Hazel gets emotional easily. Don't take it too seriously. He promised not to let anyone hurt me again. I didn't argue. Instead, I quietly held up my finger with a straight face while staying in his embrace. Yeah, I trust you, I muttered. Foos's body tensed. When I got home, I put on my headphones. Soon, a woman's voice came through. Giving up now means you're quitting halfway, she said. Foos's voice sounded uncertain. If she doesn't end this soon, what's the point? She's happy thinking I haven't gone bankrupt. She wouldn't leave me. Didn't she come to me for the money? Hazel's words were persuasive. Darlene probably believes you can recover financially. It's better to pretend you're paralyzed from an accident. If she doesn't care, it means she loves your money, not you. Foos was so convinced he actually went along with the idea. I took off my headphones, realizing the information I had on him was still useful. I opened a package that had just arrived, containing a thick stack of documents listing all the assets under Foos's name. Someone was discreetly helping him hide his assets, while others worked to get the documents to me. Foos moved quickly, and within a few days I received a notice from the hospital. Foos had been seriously injured and required immediate surgery, but the cost was overwhelming for me. I made a quick call, and the surgery proceeded smoothly. When Foos woke up, he saw my tear-streaked, swollen eyes and almost laughed. He held my hand tightly. How did you pay for the surgery? He asked. The red-bottom heels you gave me, I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. I sold them! I know you've distanced yourself from your old friends, and I didn't try to find them. Seeing me so upset, Fuss wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Lately, I've been doing my best to care for him, even though I'm the one having the hardest time. He seems unable to cope with it anymore, and I'm reaching my limit too. Thaddeus invited his friends to celebrate at the new entertainment center. I got the address, slipped on his new shoes, and stood by the door. I could hear Thaddeus speaking inside. Thanks for your help this time, but don't say anything to Darlene. Foos, did you pass the test? Someone asked. He smiled as if to say, she still needs me, despite everything. It was obvious to everyone how much I cared for him and had always stood by his side. I took the opportunity to walk inside. As soon as he noticed me, Foos sprang to his feet, the smile on his face disappearing instantly, replaced by an expression of panic. His friends were all in expensive clothing and flashy jewelry, while I wore a plain white dress. The only valuable thing I had was the pair of heels he gave me. I walked toward him unsteadily, my face devoid of emotion. How did you get from the hospital to here? I asked. Darlene, I can explain, Foos said quickly. You've been taking such good care of me, and now I can stand on my own. My friends and I made up, and they brought me here to celebrate. Don't overthink it. In moments of panic, people often say things they don't mean. My eyes stung and my chest felt tight. If you made up, why did they refuse to lend me money for your surgery? Foos hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his face. Didn't you say you lost touch with them? You didn't reach out to them? I smiled faintly and didn't answer. He glanced at his friends, and one hesitated before admitting, I've been in contact with him. The others nodded in agreement. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Someone blurted, It was Haz, before being cut off by the person next to them. Thaddeus suddenly went pale. He grabbed my shoulders, his body trembling slightly. You've lied to me more than once, I said. If you don't trust me, let's just get divorced. There's no need to play these games. He continued making excuses, saying he was afraid I didn't love him. Isn't it good that we care for each other now? I promise I won't let you be wronged again. I cut him off, my stomach churning. Do you think I'm that gullible? I had suspected the truth all along. I couldn't tell if I was just acting well or if I had genuinely fallen for his lies. Foos was stunned by my response. His eyes reddened. I yanked off my heels and hurled them at him. This is the last time I'll wear these, I said coldly, then turned and walked out. Hazel was standing at the door, and when Foos ran after me, I slapped Hazel. Furious, she snapped, There, are you happy now? She was so upset she couldn't speak, looking pitiful. Fuss comforted her, grabbing my arm to stop me from leaving. You should wear shoes. I'll have someone buy a new pair. I don't want you to hurt your feet. Annoyed, I frowned, but his grip was firm. I considered letting it go and stopping the act. Just as I was stuck for what to do, a man in the corner stood up, laughing as he pulled Foos's hand away. In that case, I'll take my sister-in-law with me. Without waiting for permission, he lifted me and walked out quickly, leaving everyone stunned. In the backseat of the car, I gave him an address. Keith Burke handed me a pair of comfortable white sneakers from the back and suggested I put them on. They fit perfectly. We both started to speak at the same time, but he smiled and let me go first. Why did you suddenly decide to stand up for me? I asked, irritated, my expression cold. If Foos refuses to sign the divorce papers because of this, will he think there's something going on between us? Keith interrupted. Don't worry, I'm always careful. I did this to stay close to my sister, and honestly, it's not a big deal. When we arrived, the car stopped, and I noticed a glint of something unsettling in Keith's eyes. Darlene, I've helped you a lot recently. Isn't there a reward for that? He asked. I froze, suddenly reluctant to leave the car. I'll wait until after the divorce to get what I want, I replied. I went upstairs, glanced out the window to see his car still parked below, and closed the curtains. Keith, Hazel's brother, was also one of Foos's close friends. I didn't know him as well as Hazel did. When I discovered Foos was faking his bankruptcy, Keith gave me documents I couldn't have obtained on my own. It was a partnership. I hadn't been sure before, but after today, everything was crystal clear. I don't want to move from one dangerous situation to another. Men's promises are unreliable. I quickly noticed over 30 missed calls on my phone. Just as I was about to return one, it rang again. Darlene, where are you? Where did that jerk take you? Thaddeus's panicked voice shouted through the phone. Heath had just lifted me into the car as Foos rushed out after us. On the way, Heath managed to lose him. I'll come to the office tomorrow afternoon to discuss the divorce, I said, hanging up before he could reply, then turned my phone off. I had sent the divorce papers to Foos ahead of time, but he didn't respond. Later, I discovered he had been arrested the night before for drunk driving. This morning, while at the hospital for a checkup, I ran into Hazel, who had just exited the obstetrics and gynecology department. Her face registered surprise. I made some inquiries and learned Hazel was pregnant. Seeing her joyful expression, it was clear the baby belonged to Thaddeus. I immediately called Heath, asking him to let Hazel know I'd be meeting Foos today to finalize the divorce. As expected, when I arrived at the office, Hazel was already there. I had been drinking earlier, and Foos's secretary knocked on the door to interrupt their conversation. Mr. Morrison, your wife is here. I walked in, and Thaddeus's expression quickly changed. He ushered Hazel out in a hurry. Hazel, with tears in her eyes, ignored his protests and glared at me defiantly. I'm pregnant with Thaddeus's baby, she declared. Foos's face darkened immediately. He called his secretary, trying to get Hazel to leave. He studied my face carefully. I sighed, sat on the couch, and looked at him calmly. What do you want? To get rid of her and keep lying to me? I tried to remember all the past hurt, and my eyes welled up with tears. Fuss approached me, but I deftly stepped away. Just then, Hazel moved between us, hugged Fuss tightly, and said, Thaddeus, we have a child now. Darlene only wants your money. She came to you initially to get help for her schooling, but now she wants to take advantage of your family. I didn't argue, but Hazel grew more frantic, silently pleading with Foos to push me away and choose her. This time, she stayed quiet. Fuss glanced at Hazel, hesitating. I knew he was torn, haunted by the past. I stood up, gently pushed Hazel toward him, and whispered, Thaddeus, sign the divorce papers and send them to me. I don't care about the money. I just want out of this marriage. Sensing my sincerity, he brushed Hazel aside and moved toward me. Darlene, he called softly. I stopped, turned, and slapped him. Instead of getting angry, he held my hand and encouraged me to continue. Does she call you Thaddeus's too? I asked. His expression shifted as he recalled his earlier promises. Hazel's aphasia was fake, her bankruptcy a lie, and the car accident staged. I couldn't believe I'd been so naive to let him manipulate me. It was time to end this. I feigned intense pain as I walked away. The fear in Foos's eyes wasn't enough for me. What happened that year had all been planned. Hazel had a point, but after the drama between her and Thaddeus, no one believed them anymore. Even his closest friends only expressed guilt to me privately. Lately, I'd been experiencing occasional physical pain. After reading my health report, I was relieved the issue wasn't serious and decided to proceed with surgery. Foos hadn't contacted me in a while. I was nervous about the procedure, but I had no family to lean on. To others, I looked like a lonely orphan. Once I had been a cherished daughter, spoiled by my parents and older brother. Though my family wasn't wealthy, I had felt the purest love. After the surgery, I woke up feeling weak. Someone dabbed my dry lips with a cotton swab soaked in warm water. Do you want some water? He asked. As my vision cleared, I saw Keith holding the cup, his face full of concern. I nodded and rasped, Thank you for being here. My voice sounded like Donald Duck, rough and scratchy. I widened my eyes, surprised by the sound, and Keith looked equally awkward. We exchanged glances and laughed together. Just then, Fuss burst through the door, his face darkening when he saw Keith. Although he hadn't contacted me directly, Fuss had been keeping tabs on me. If not for Keith's help, he might have shown up at the hospital the day I was admitted. Why didn't you let me know? Foos asked. Couldn't you have sent a friend to keep me company? His tone implied Keith shouldn't have been there. I rolled my eyes internally. The truth was, I had no friends. Throughout our relationship, Foos had kept me isolated from anyone outside his circle, most of whom disliked me anyway. A mix of emotions swirled inside me, but I stayed silent. Are you feeling unwell? I still kept silent. Foos wanted to call the doctor, but Heath spoke up first, saying, Her throat hurts, and the surgery was successful. Foos didn't acknowledge his reminder. How did you end up here? Fuss asked. Keith smiled. I came with my sister for her appointment and happened to run into my brother's wife. Now that you're here, I'll head out. Keith was always thorough. Upon hearing about the prenatal checkup, Foos looked uneasy and glanced at me instinctively. Then he took Heath with him and left. When Foos returned, I was resting with my eyes closed. He sat beside my bed, staying quiet for a while before saying, Darlene, thank you for everything you've done over the years. I'm sorry about what happened with Hazel, but I don't want to lose you. I opened my eyes slowly. My voice, though normal, was still hoarse. I've given up so much for love, and now you casually thank me for being a good wife? I've done things I never wanted to do. No, that's not what I meant, he quickly explained. I promise to treat you better and make sure you're never hurt again. Really? I sacrificed everything for you, yet you still doubt my love and assume I'm only after money. I laughed bitterly. Fuss decided to cut ties with Hazel for good. Can you trust me this time? You think Hazel's the problem? The real pain comes from you, I said, my voice breaking. It's not those I don't care about who hurt me. It's always you. Bankruptcy was just another test. I can't sleep because I worry you'll give up on life. Foos listened silently, tears running down his face. He suddenly took my hand and looked at me seriously. Then test me too. If you think I can't change, that's fine. I'll win you over again. I suppressed a laugh, pretending disbelief. You want to pursue me, yet refuse to divorce me? His expression turned solemn. I'll agree to the divorce, and then I'll chase you again. I showed no emotion, but he spoke with determination, pleading, after the divorce, I'll give you all my assets, even my company shares. Just give me a chance. Surprised, I looked at him and asked, Are you serious? He nodded, his eyes sparkling. You have to marry me again, I replied coldly. Let's see how you do. But he seemed to take it as a yes, thinking he knew me well. After I was discharged from the hospital, I went to get the divorce certificate. Holding the money, I felt slightly dazed. When I left the Civil Affairs Bureau, I dropped the pretense and didn't offer Foos a kind word. At home, as I reached to turn on the lights, I bumped into someone. I froze. Just as I was about to scream, a large hand covered my mouth. Without thinking, I bit down. There was a soft cry, and a familiar voice said, Don't bite! It's me, Heath! I quickly turned on the light and relaxed when I saw him. Are you out of your mind? I asked. Keith just grinned, unfazed. Congrats on the divorce! Now I want some compensation. I heard you might still forgive him. His face, usually charming, held a hint of hostility. I laughed lightly. Who could resist when he offered me so much money? You know I love money. Keith's gaze sharpened. You chose me first, didn't you? I stayed calm. If you're willing to sell me your Morrison Group shares, I'll choose you right now. I tiptoed and kissed him. He suddenly grabbed me like a madman, and it took us a long time to part. Wait here, he said before leaving. As soon as he left, my legs gave out and I collapsed. He was truly reckless. Foos and Heath should fight each other, I thought. Shortly after, Heath sent me the transfer contract. Lately, Foos had been trying to see me, but I was too busy. One day, he saw me on a date with Heath. That broke him. He snapped, attacking his former friends and shouting angrily. The secretary tried to separate them, but I stopped her. My eyes stung, but I smiled. Memories resurfaced. In 8th grade, my parents and brother died in a crash involving a rare blue sports car while taking my brother to college. I ended up in an orphanage. After much effort, I learned it wasn't an accident. A group of rich teens had been street racing. The blue car belonged to Thaddeus, racing against Heath. I initially chose Heath but realized his volatile nature made him too dangerous. So, I forced myself to stick with Thaddeus. Now the scene was bloody. I took an involuntary step back. Both men bore visible scars, yet neither would stop fighting. I moved closer, and Thaddeus stopped immediately, afraid of hurting me. Heath took advantage and landed a solid punch. Thaddeus considered retaliating, but froze when he saw me beside Heath. He tried to pull me to his side, but I shook off his hand. His eyes filled with confusion. He couldn't understand my feelings. Heath, unable to stand Thaddeus's gaze, declared, Darlene is my girlfriend now. Thaddeus's veins bulged, his eyes darting between me and Heath. Heath smiled triumphantly, looking proud. Aside from the chaos, I had provoked Heath before, and honestly, there wasn't much to add. He's obsessed now, probably because he's held a grudge against Foos for a long time. We both remained firm, and I kept an eye on Foos's actions. When Heath tried to pull me away, Foos suddenly grabbed me. I instinctively released Heath and fell into Foos's arms, immediately responding, Mr. Burke, I'm not your girlfriend. Keith looked at me, surprised, then a sly grin appeared on his face. So, you're plotting against me? This is just my answer to what you did earlier, I retorted. Foos quickly pulled me behind him, shielding me. I stuck my tongue out at Heath from behind Foos, which only enraged him further. To him, this kind of insult was beyond unacceptable. He immediately unleashed all his resources, vowing to destroy me. But he didn't realize that Fuss would go to any lengths to protect me. The more ruthless Heath became, the more determined Fuss was. I stayed relaxed at the villa, watching everything unfold. By the way, I replaced all the household staff. Just then, Hazel arrived. I didn't stop her. She entered, not noticing me, and poured something into a cup. I quietly observed from the second floor. When she finally saw me, she looked nervous. I walked over, picked up her cup, added water to it, and held it casually. "Sit down," I said coolly. Hazel's eyes kept darting to the cup in my hand. "You didn't just steal Foos, now you want my brother too. You're shameless," she muttered, trying to stay calm while touching her belly. "How far along are you?" I asked. "Foos doesn't even recognize the baby, so why have it? Do you actually love him?" I found the question amusing and chuckled softly. Her alertness grew as she saw my smile. But she wasn't prepared for what came next. I stepped forward quickly and poured the water from the cup into her mouth. Hazel struggled, finally pushing me away. "What are you doing? You could kill someone!" she screamed, terrified, clutching her stomach. "Call an ambulance!" she cried, but it was too late. Blood flowed from between her legs. I instructed someone to call for help. Someone like Foos shouldn't have children. Hazel was taken to the hospital, and the police began their investigation. It was discovered that Hazel had poisoned herself with a lethal dose. Even if she survived, she couldn't escape the law. She had thrown away her future. Heath's family business soon encountered trouble, and everyone suspected Foos's involvement. When things settled down, I went to Foos's office. I hadn't contacted him in a while. He was overwhelmed by the rivalry with Heath. His face lit up when he saw me, and he tried to hug me, but I turned him down coldly. I sat in his chair, crossed my legs, and said, "Mr. Morrison, let's discuss the company's ownership." He looked shocked and confused. "What did you say?" I calmly repeated myself. "Do you understand now?" Foos, who had dealt with countless business schemes, quickly regained his composure. "Darlene, I know you're still angry, but this isn't funny." I smiled faintly. "So, were you just toying with me back then?" "Of course not. I mean it," he replied sincerely. After a pause, he agreed. "All right, if this makes you feel secure." Watching him give in for love, I asked, "Would you really do anything for me?" "Of course," he said firmly. "Then go die." His smile froze instantly. Forcing a strained grin, he said, "You love me. How could you ask me to die?" I remained expressionless. "I'm not joking." Fuss looked stunned, the silence stretching between us. "That's impossible, Darlene," he muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "You didn't believe me when I said I loved you. Now I'm telling you I don't love you anymore, and you still don't believe me." His voice cracked, unwilling to accept it. "Please stop lying to yourself." I felt no sympathy. "The Morrison family can go down with you," I said coldly. Foos's breathing grew ragged, his confidence fading. His voice turned hoarse. I was done. I signaled my bodyguard to knock him out and take him away. Once I finalized the company's restructuring and the transfer of ownership, I went to see Foos. When he woke up, I was the only one there, his eyes filled with hope. "Darlene, I messed up. Please don't do this to me." I didn't answer. Instead, I pushed him into the fish pond. A swarm of fish swam toward him. He realized he wasn't at home. Darkness surrounded us like the depths of a forest. He tried to stand but kept slipping, falling repeatedly. He crouched awkwardly by the pond, pleading for my help. I knelt down. "It's hard, isn't it?" "Yes, Darlene, help me," he begged. Tears filled my eyes as I stared at the water's surface. "My parents and brother suffered the same fate. You abandoned them, and they became food for the fish. They sleep forever in the cold depths." Foos looked bewildered. I wiped my tears away. "Do you seriously not remember? Do their lives mean nothing to you?" "Darlene, you've got it wrong," Foos said. But as he spoke, his expression shifted suddenly, as if a realization had struck him. He remained silent for a moment before finally muttering, "That's not what I meant." Hearing that made my anger explode. I used a pole to shove him into the water, and he struggled to climb out. We continued this back and forth until I was completely worn out. "Darlene, I was wrong," he said, gasping. "Your family isn't here because of me. My parents are gone now. I'll take care of you and make amends to them." I felt numb, detached, like a spectator watching from afar. He caused this mess, yet he acted as though he were uninvolved. The bodyguard approached me and asked if I wanted to handle him. I shook my head. With everything my family endured, breaking the law to end his life wasn't an option. Doing it myself would only leave me with guilt. Pick him up and dump him on the street. Fuss was barely hanging on, but when he heard I was letting him go, he forced a weak smile. I've been with Darlene long enough to know she loves me. Hearing that, I laughed coldly, then turned and walked away. I knew he was just too afraid to face the truth, but it didn't matter. His words held no weight. He was heading toward a dead end. I followed up with the police about my family's case and soon learned Foos had died. He had lost his mind and hired thugs to crash into his car. What started as an act had turned into a fatal reality. Keith visited me after hearing I broke things off with Foos. He mentioned he was now supported by a wealthy woman after his business collapsed. I hadn't seen him, but people like him annoyed me. His sister had lost her baby and was now in a coma. 10 years later, I finally received the official verdict about my parents' and brother's deaths. As long as I was alive, it wasn't too late. Many bodies had been buried in the pond, their identities lost over time. I took a handful of soil and buried it at my family's gravesite. I chose a beautiful location where I planned for all four of us to have a future resting place together. After that, I began supporting children who couldn't afford an education. I helped them through middle school, high school, and even college, as long as they wanted to study. During my own school years, I had to juggle work and classes, constantly surrounded by poverty. I didn't want them to experience the same struggles. Yet, I never saw my hardships as a source of shame. They were a badge of honor. Years later, when I turned 60, many of those children who now called me Mom celebrated my birthday. After the party, I joyfully took 3 pieces of cake that had been set aside just for me. I headed to the cemetery to share my happiness and sorrows with my mother.